Alright, so this is kind of an experiment for this week. If you guys are familiar with Nerd Alert News here on the GonnaGeek Network, it's a show hosted by me. I'm Chris Farrell. You've probably seen me in some other GonnaGeek Network podcasts, but it's predominantly a solo podcast. Normally I do it by myself. Occasionally I have some guests that come and help me out, things like that, but this time around I do not. So I was going to try something different this week, and what I'm trying different is doing a live recording of the podcast I do. You'll actually get to see me do some edits on the fly. You'll get to see the script I have, some things like that. It's going to be an experiment. We'll see how well it works. I'm curious as to how well it'll get pulled off. But it's an experiment. I wanted to try it, give folks a chance to see a live recording of Nerd Alert News. You'll see a lot of stuff going on down here in this Audacity window where you see my mouse moving around. You actually saw me switch my speakers over to the iMic that I currently use. So when I do playback, when I'm doing a quick edit, you guys will hear it on here in addition to my voice. I'll also hear it on my headphones instead of over my speakers like I normally would. So why don't we just get started with this live episode 42 of Nerd Alert News? And I just hit my mic for some reason as I was putting my headphones on. So this is off to a fantastic start. A fantastic, fantastic start. So you'll see my process for how I do things, and we'll have fun with it. Hopefully, if anyone's watching live, they enjoy what they see, and maybe we'll do some more of these in the future. So all that being said, I'm about a minute and a half, 2 minutes into this live video. Why don't we start recording the podcast? So here we go in 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, I'm Chris Farrell, and welcome to episode 42 of Nerd Alert News. It's hard to keep on top of all the nerdy news that floods the internet, but that's where this show comes in. I'm going to do all the hard work. I'm going to find that nerdy news that you need to know. Basically, I'm here to keep you in the know on the news I think is the coolest. And we've had a little bit of a break because last week we put out 3 episodes, so I didn't put anything out until Saturday of this week. I'm recording on June 25th, 2016. You might be wondering, why might this sound a little different? Well, I'm trying an experiment right now. So while I do this recording on Audacity, which is what I use to get the audio MP3 files out to you guys, I'm also streaming it on YouTube Live. So it's a chance for YouTube viewers to see the process that goes into building this episode of Nerd Alert News. They will get to see my creative edits. They'll get to hear me stumble over words in a script. It'll be exciting, and they might actually get to hear me curse on occasion too, because sometimes when I screw up, a dirty word slips out of my mouth. So there is potential that the video version of this episode of Nerd Alert News might not be clean, whereas the clean MP3 file will be going out on the RSS feed shortly. So if you're watching live, you see I just paused right there, mostly because I had to get a drink. It's one of the it's one of the perils of solo podcasting is sometimes you need a drink. So let's keep going then. I'm going to do a little cleanup on this Audacity file, on this audio track, and cut off some of that dead air, and then I'm going to append onto my recording as I go forward. So all that being said, you've got an idea of why this episode might be slightly different, but I know what you guys really want is let's just roll on in to the headlines. So if you're watching live, I'm going to leave a little bit of a blank space there because I'll edit stuff in post-production for the sound bumps. I'm not going to do those live because it sounds like it would be painful and I just don't really want to. I'll be honest, I don't want to. Yeah, maybe later we'll look into doing it differently, but let's move on. Let's get back to the stories. So the first headline comes from comicbook.com, where Sony has said they plan to work a bit more with Marvel. As we all know, Spider-Man Homecoming is the first movie coming out from this partnership between Marvel Studios and Sony Pictures. But it is not going to be the last. This comes courtesy of Sony Pictures Entertainment chairman Tom Rothman. The Hollywood Reporter asked Rothman about the possibility of building a Spider-Man movie universe out of the partnership and about the possibility of Sony working with Marvel on other projects. He said yes to both those questions. It's been fantastic, our relationship with Marvel. Now, there has been some news that came out over the weekend. I haven't seen a second confirmation. I will mention it to you guys right now. Supposedly, Sony might be looking at doing a Silver Sable movie. kind of a spin-off that introduces the character of Silver Sable, which would be very interesting because I don't think I've seen her in the comics lately. But that's neither here nor there. Rothman did give some additional detail on the relationship between Marvel and Sony, stating, Sony has the ultimate authority, but we have deferred the creative lead to Marvel because they know what they're doing. I think that's a fair statement. I think we could all kind of agree that right now, Marvel hasn't really misfired with any of their movies. There's stuff that we thought might be a misfire. Ant-Man, I had minimal expectations at best going in, and I had a lot of fun with it. Guardians of the Galaxy, I was very worried about. And a piece of me was worried about Civil War because I didn't know how they were going to balance off those characters. But they pulled it off, and it was well done. So, smart of Sony to defer to Marvel here, because Marvel's got a creative vision that is going to be very interesting. And let's be honest, Sony and Marvel both like making money, so let's play nice together, and the Spider-Man movies will make a ton of bank. We already know they're going to make a bunch of money because, let's see, Robert Downey Jr. is even going to be in them, and he is one of the biggest draws in the MCU. And that is the first story. Another water break for me real quick. One of the perils of live broadcasting, like I said, you guys are getting to peek behind the curtain and see how far I venture off script and not. And before I get back into the stories that I'm recording here, it used to be much more difficult. I would have to do multiple takes per story, and I've kind of gotten to the point where as long as I'm sort of close to what I originally intended to say, I'm okay with it. As long as I'm not going and tripping over my words, I don't go back and re-record. I started doing that early on because I wanted it to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect in an audio podcast, guys. You can dial it in, you can get it really good, but you'll never hit that perfect mark. And if you try to do that, you will be in the editing room or the recording room forever. And it is hellacious if you do that. Absolutely hellacious. So, you can see we finished story 1 in the headlines. We're moving on to story 2 in the headlines. If you are watching live and you want to see the show notes for yourself, they're obviously in the video, but you can also go over to bit.ly/nerdalert42, and that will take you to the show notes yourself. You could click on some of the stories if you wanted to see them, things like that. But I'm going to get back to recording the actual podcast now instead of talking to anyone who might be watching live or at a later date. Let's move on to story 2. So the second headline story this week, it makes me very happy inside because it's all about Star Wars. News has come out that Darth Vader is returning to the big screen to appear in Star Wars Rogue One. I got this story from makingstarwars.net. However, it's Entertainment Weekly that had all of this news. They put it online as well as pictures and set photos that showed off all of the new characters in Star Wars Rogue One and even gave some background on some of them. There's some really cool news out there on them. Even a connection to Star Wars Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels with some of the characters. I'm not going to dive into them on this episode, but I'm sure it'll come up on something else because I want to talk about Darth Vader. Like I said earlier, Entertainment Weekly broke the news that the Dark Lord of the Sith himself will have a role in Star Wars Rogue One. Not only that, but James Earl Jones is returning to reprise his role as the voice of Darth Vader. This is awesome. Now, if you just watch the movies, you're like, well, of course he would do that. Here's the thing. He hasn't been the voice of Vader all the time in some of their other media projects. If you played, say, the Force Unleashed games that featured Darth Vader in them as your master, it was not James Earl Jones. In fact, I believe it is the guy who did the voice of Chad Vader in that infamous web series that provides the voice of Darth Vader. And he does a very good job. He's very good at playing Darth Vader, but he is not James Earl Jones. He is very close. Now, if you watch Rebels, you know that James Earl Jones has come back to do the voice of Darth Vader in there. So it's not unheard of, but the confirmation that James Earl Jones is coming back to do the voice in Rogue One, it's awesome. Add in the fact that Darth Vader's appearing, that is also a pretty cool point. Again, this is why I have a nice ability to pause my track. As you saw in the live video, I paused my track before I put that cough out. I'm going to get some water again real quick. So we did get some insight into the role Vader might be playing in Rogue One. It's not going to be a ton of screen time from what we can tell, but we got some background on how he fit in. The Rebels, we know they're barely familiar with Vader. We've kind of seen in Star Wars Rebels, he's kind of a myth. He's out there, but it's really the Inquisitors that are doing a lot for him, and we're not quite sure, and the Rebels aren't quite sure where exactly he is, how powerful he is. They're barely familiar with him, but even the Empire, it seems he's more a legend than an everyday presence. The director of Rogue One, Gareth Edwards, gave some background. He said, within the rebellion, it's not commonly spoken about. Within the Empire, there's the culture of knowing of the existence of Darth Vader. There's definitely an underlying feeling that there is a power, a dark power, available to the Empire, and that if you overstep your mark, you will suffer the consequences. So Vader's on the periphery of things. He's the Emperor's enforcer, as we've known, but he doesn't seem to be taking an active role in leading the Imperial Navy during Rogue One. However, as we've seen in... and that's why we edit. Alright, let me fix this. However, as we saw in the original trilogy, Vader does play a big role, obviously, but he does not seem to be a military authority in Episode 4, whereas in Episode 5, he has his own Star Destroyer, admirals are regularly deferring to him. In Episode 4, he's having to defer to Grand Admiral Tarkin. Not Grand Admiral. Wow, is he Grand Admiral? I'm sure I messed that up. He's not Grand Admiral. What is Tarkin? Oh, man, I honestly can't remember. I'm having a complete brain fart. But if you guys do remember, shoot me a message at the Chris Farrell or at Nerd Alert Show on Twitter, because I'm messing it up. I wanted to say Governor Tarkin, but I can't remember. Anyway, going back on topic, Vader has to defer to Tarkin. So it doesn't seem that he gets his great power in the military until after the Death Star falls. And Rogue One kind of seems to hint at that Vader's on the periphery of things. He's a powerful entity that comes in, he destroys things, he takes care of things, and then he's gone. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this Vader fits into Rogue One. I don't anticipate him having a ton of screen time. He's going to be the boogeyman in the distance that starts pursuing the rebels, and then he'll get to do something incredible at the end, I'm sure, to try and capture the plans, but fail. We don't have any news on who's going to be wearing the suit in Rogue One, but there's been rumors out there it's a British actor by the name of Spencer Wilding. It is not David Prowse returning the role of Vader, which should not surprise anyone, as his relationship with Lucasfilm, not that great. But we only have to wait until December for Rogue One, so we'll get to see all sorts of Vadery goodness come December. They might even sneak something in one of the trailers before then. I, for one, cannot wait to see this. And that's story 2 down. Oh, excuse me. Let's see what's going on here. Scroll down a little bit. If you're watching the live video, you kind of get a teaser as to seeing what all is coming up this week. Maybe it's not a little fair in that regard that you guys get to see what's coming up. I'm too lazy to try and hide it so that you don't see it, though, I'll be honest. One last headline story this week, and this one is a doozy, coming courtesy of Entertainment Weekly and Grant Gustin's Twitter account. It is confirmed they are doing Flashpoint on this upcoming season of The Flash. Many of us expected it, but Grant Gustin confirmed that this upcoming season of Flash is going to be all about Flashpoint. Episode 1, in fact, of season 3 is entitled Flashpoint. How do we know? On June 20th, Grant Gustin went on Twitter and said, Flashpoint, this is not a drill. It is not a drill, in fact. It is happening. So if you're not familiar, here's what Flashpoint is. It is the event that preceded DC Comics' 2011 relaunch of 52 of its titles that was dubbed the New 52. Storylines converged for a crossover arc that was written by Jeff Johns, who is now an executive producer on The Flash and the chief creative officer at DC Comics, and in fact, he's now going to be spearheading the DC Cinematic Universe. It's also a really good animated movie. I'm not sure. It might still be on Netflix right now, but if it's not, it's well worth picking up at like Walmart for $9.99, which I think is what it's retailing for at this point. But Flashpoint, it's awesome. It's a time travel story. For those that aren't familiar, here is some Flashpoint spoilers for you because I'm going to give some background. We start off in current day. Flash is doing his thing in Central City, saving people's lives, has an encounter with the Reverse Flash. Reverse Flash threatens him as per normal. Things go awry. They think they've saved everything, and then Barry kind of blacks out. And he wakes up in another world. And he wakes up, he's Barry Allen, he's in the crime lab. He sees something about Citizen Cold fighting crime, and Barry goes, oh, I have to go and stop this, and runs off, but never gets to super speed. And we find out that he's in a world somehow where he does not have his powers, and he tries to figure out what's going on. It's a whole world where Atlantis is fighting Themyscira. All sorts of crazy things have happened, but what it all comes down to is that this brand new world is not a result of the Reverse Flash causing it, like Barry ends up thinking, but is the fact that Barry goes back in time and saves his mother from dying, that starts this Elseworld that causes many problems and causes many of the characters you know and love to not exist in the Flashpoint timeline. It is a very good comic story. It is a very good animated movie. And as we saw at the end of season 2 of Flash, Barry goes back in time, saves his mother. That's the exact event that causes the Flashpoint universe in the comics. It's going to be really cool. I know they can't do everything that we saw in the comics, but I expect to see Wentworth Miller be Citizen Cold, who is a superhero in the Flashpoint universe. It's going to be super cool, guys. I can't wait. We have until early October, I think, when season 3 of Flash hits CW. Alrighty. So if you're watching the live stream right now, that is it for our headline stories. But before going into a featured story, we of course have to do a network promo. So let's get back to recording the audio right now. Before moving on to our featured story, I do always like to take a moment and remind folks that Nerd Alert News is a part of the GonnaGeek Network. There is 17 awesome podcasts over on the GonnaGeek Network from a variety of topics, some that are about TV shows, some that are about general geek culture, all sorts of things, and I do like to try and highlight something from the network with each episode. This week I want to talk to you guys about episode 22 of Game Life Balance US. It's entitled Mighty Number 9 Launch, Kickstarter Fails, and Booking Air Travel. Here's what you need to know about it. John and Cody discuss the epic tale of the Mighty Number 9 video game launch, plus other bests and worsts of Kickstarter games. Then Cody launches into a tangent about the Tremors movie series before sharing some tips and tricks for booking international travel online. So you can go and find that over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Click on the Game Life Balance US podcast logo. It'll take you directly to their shows. And while you're there, feel free to check out one of the other awesome shows that are on the network. And on a brief side note, if you host a podcast, a geeky podcast, and you're looking for a network home, a place to go to, the GonnaGeek Network, we're always looking for new people to come and join us. Head on over to GonnaGeek.com/join. There's a little form you can fill out to submit your podcast to try and become a part of the GonnaGeek Network. We're always looking for new geeky folks to come and join us and share in our passions. Ooh, and the network promo's done. Excuse me a sec, guys. Yeah, it's real attractive podcasting or live video streaming when you see me have to pause the recording because I still have the remnants of a cold from the last 2 weeks and blow my nose. Sorry you guys had to see that on camera. Well, it's kind of a necessary evil. But I guess it's time to start wrapping up the show. We've got to do a featured story. So if you're watching the live stream right now, I'm about to record the featured story of the week, and it's a doozy. I keep saying doozy. Why am I saying doozy, guys? That's weird. Sometimes I'm weird. I don't understand. What am I doing? I'm saying the word doozy. All right, so let me get back to business here. Let's do some recording. So before we wrap up the show, we've got to talk about our featured story this week. If you've heard me on any other podcast, followed me on social media, or just met me in real life, you probably know I'm a Mass Effect fanboy. I love the 3-game trilogy that BioWare put out. I have my issues with the ending of Mass Effect 3, but many people do. But there's some really cool news coming out about Mass Effect Andromeda outside of what we learned at E3. And I would like to say thank you to Neil, my co-host from the Starling Tribune, for bringing this story to my attention. This story comes from comicbook.com, where we have learned that the Mass Effect books will be the lead-in to Andromeda coming up. It would be nice to know what happens between Mass Effect 3's ending and the Andromeda series when it kicks off later this year. Titan Books is going to be looking to do just that with their new 4-port... Wow. I screwed that up. All right. with their new 4-part book series coming up later this year. According to Titan Books, the novels will act as a prequel and sequel to the events in the games and will become part of the overarching Mass Effect saga. They will focus on key characters and answer the many questions fans have been asking. Okay, so here's some of the big questions that I know I've been asking. What the hell happened to the Normandy crew at the end of Mass Effect 3 after they crash land on a planet? Regardless of your ending, unless everyone dies, they're going to end up on that planet. How do they get off that planet? The extended cut DLC content seems to hint that they get away eventually, but what happens when they land there? How do we get out of it? And even better, what is the true ending of the game? As you know, if you've played the game, there's 3 endings. There's destruction, synthesis, and I can't remember, and control, I believe is what it is. In fact, there's also a 4th. You can shoot the Star Child if you really wanted to. But since it's a choose-your-own ending kind of thing, what is going to be canon? I mean, I know BioWare has said that the ending to Mass Effect 3 doesn't affect Andromeda because it's set later in the future and in a completely different galaxy, but these books take place after Mass Effect 3, so I would assume it has to talk about what the ending is from Mass Effect 3. They're not going to put out 3 different books based off of your ending, I wouldn't think. So maybe we'll get a determination as to what the canon ending is of Mass Effect 3, and hopefully maybe some kind of hint that possibly Shepard survived it. I know I want to believe in the good old fairy tales, and I do know that if you play it on destruction at the end, you choose the red option, you kind of get a little preview where you see Shepard's chest raising lower underneath some rubble, so it's possible that Shepard might be alive. So just when do we start getting some of these answers? Well, Titan will release the first novel, Mass Effect Andromeda Initiative, in August of this year. The second novel will hit in March of 2017, the third in September 2017, and the fourth then in March of 2018. Initiative will be written by N.K. Jemisin, who is the author of The 100,000 Kingdoms, and the fourth will be by Mac Walters, who is the game's creative director over at BioWare. Authors have not been released for novels 2 and 3 as of yet. Okay, I'm going to go on Amazon shortly after I'm done recording this and probably pre-order the first book because I need me some new Mass Effect in my life, and getting some answers as to some of the untold things and the questions I had at the end of Mass Effect 3. I'm totally on board. I want to know what happens. So I'll be going to go check those out. Hopefully other Mass Effect fans like myself will be checking them out and then getting our questions answered, finding out just what happened at the end of the game. All right, it is time to start wrapping up the show. If you're watching the live stream, you can see I've gotten to the end of my show notes. There's not much left on there. So we're probably just going to cover that and then shut down the live stream. Kind of an interesting adventure we've had this week. So as I start wrapping up the show, I did want to remind you, listener, if you want any more details on any of the stories I've covered this week on Nerd Alert News, the show notes are available online. You can head on over to shownotes.nerdalertnews.com. On that page, you will see all of the show notes embedded in a Google Docs embed. It's easy to go and read any of the stories I've talked about on this episode or many of the other ones. If you want to get in touch with the show, there's a variety of ways to do so. Email directly to me at nerdalertnews247@gmail.com, tweet to @nerdalertshow, or tweet directly to me at @thechrisfarrell, or just go over to GonnaGeek.com and click on the Nerd Alert News button. You'll find all of the ways to contact me there. Your feedback is hugely important to me as I go forward trying to shape the show, and I really do enjoy the interaction I have with listeners, and I love getting suggested stories like I have from listeners such as Cajun Sean and Neil. Why did I do an there? Why did I do that? I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I did that either. Awesome. Alrighty. Very few lines left to record. So here we go in 3, 2, excuse me, 1. But I think that's going to wrap up this latest installment of Nerd Alert News. But don't worry, I'll be back real soon with your next Nerd Alert. Bye, guys. So that is going to wrap up the live recording here on YouTube. You've seen the process I used to go through things. I only had to pause and take care of like 2 little audio missteps this time. So maybe it's good luck for me and I should do more of these on YouTube going forward. We'll see what happens on that though, because I'm kind of nervous. You guys are going to see me if I screw up, and I might not have screwed up this time, but I might screw up in the future, and then you'll judge me. No, I don't really care. I'll probably do them online because it's kind of fun. And now Steven can't yell at me because we could potentially have live content on our YouTube channel 7 days a week, which would be pretty daggone cool. So I think I'm going to shut down this live stream here in just a second. Real quick, the next live show over on Geeks.live for the GonnaGeek Network, if you want to watch, is Sunday morning. It is a podcast I'm on. It's called All Things Good and Nerdy. It records live at 11 a.m. Eastern. Just head over to Geeks.live and be part of the Peanut Gallery. So if you did watch online, thank you so much. If you're catching this later, please feel free to go and check out the completed podcast yourself. But I think that is going to wrap this up, and I'll see you guys later.